Some prisons are made of marble and gold. Jasmine Torres learned this truth on a Wednesday evening when the Singapore skyline blazed with the colors of sunset, and her entire world shifted on its axis without warning. The coffee machine hissed its final breath at exactly 6:45. Jasmine wiped down the gleaming counters of the Golden Bean, her hands moving with practiced efficiency born from 18 months of repetition. Around her, the café glowed with warm amber light, all polished wood and brass fixtures designed to make the wealthy feel even wealthier as they sip drinks that cost more than her daily wage. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the financial district stretched outward. A forest of glass towers reaching toward heaven, each one a monument to dreams she could never afford to dream. Her phone buzzed. Jasmine dried her hands and checked. The screen, though she already knew what message waited. Her mother's words were brief, surgical in their precision. Treatment delayed again. They need payment up front. Nina is asking for you.
Nina.
10 years old with eyes like liquid chocolate and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes.
Oh.
Nina, whose body was betraying her, whose bone marrow had turned traitor, whose only hope was a treatment that might as well cost 1,000,000 stars plucked from the sky. Jasmine had worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, sold everything except the silver cross their grandmother had given her. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. She closed her eyes and breathed through the tightness in her chest. Mr. Tan, the cafe manager, was already gone for the evening, trusting her to lock up. The other staff had scattered like birds released from a cage. Jasmine was alone with the soft jazz music and the scent of roasted beans that had begun to smell like failure. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Jasmine frowned. The entire building's electrical system was state-of-the-art. It never faltered. She reached for her bag, ready to leave this golden prison for her tiny shared apartment across the city, when she heard the footsteps. They came from the main corridor, measured and deliberate. The complex should have been empty. Security locked the external doors at 7 sharp. Her heartbeat quickened. Jasmine grabbed the nearest weapon, coffee tamper, and held it like a pathetic shield. The figure that emerged from the corridor made her breath catch. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, with dark hair swept back from a face carved from bronze and shadow. His eyes found hers. Immediately, black as midnight oil, intense with a focus that made her skin prickle with awareness. He moved like water, smooth and inevitable, carrying the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. "Miss Torres?" he said. His accent was subtle, cultured, with hints of British boarding schools and Arabian Nights. "Please don't be alarmed." "Who are you?" Jasmine kept the counter between them, her knuckles white around the tamper. "The building is closed. You need to leave." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I could say the same to you, but that would be redundant, considering I now own this building, and the 3 beside it, and the entire block, actually." Jasmine stared. "That's impossible. The papers were signed at 4 this afternoon. My legal team worked remarkably fast." He moved closer, each step reducing the safe distance between them. "My name is Rashid here. Okay. And you, Miss Torres, are the reason I just spent $270 million. The words made no sense. They bounced around her skull like stones in an empty jar, refusing to form a coherent picture. "I don't understand, you will." He stopped at the counter's edge. Up close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of exhaustion beneath his composed exterior. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in years. "Been watching you for 6 weeks, 3 days, and approximately 4 hours. Not in person every time, that would be impractical. But I have eyes everywhere." Cold dread washed through her veins. "You've been stalking me?" Observing, he corrected softly. "There's a difference. Stalking implies obsession without purpose. I always have purpose. This is insane. I'm calling security. Security works for me now. As does Mr. Tan. As does everyone in this building." His eyes never left hers. "Including you, Miss Torres. I don't work for you. I work for the cafe management company, which I also purchased. The acquisition was part of the package." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. Jasmine saw legal documents, signatures, official seals. Name appeared in a highlighted section. As of 7 o'clock this evening, your employment contract was transferred to Al Zahir Enterprises. Your salary has been tripled, and there are additional benefits we need to discuss. Jasmine set down the tamper before she dropped it. Her hands were shaking. Why? Because you need $200,000 for your sister's treatment. Because you've been working yourself to death trying to earn it, because every other avenue has closed. He pocketed his phone. And because I can provide what you need if you provide what I need in return. The café suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing inward. Jasmine's throat was dry. What do you want? Rashid's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Something hungry and haunted, and entirely too human for a man who had just bought a city block like ordering lunch. You, he said simply, for 1 year, under contract. The terms we'll discuss in detail upstairs in my office. You'll have legal representation present if you wish. Everything will be documented, legitimate, and entirely your choice. But I promise. If you agree, your sister will have her treatment tomorrow morning. The best doctors, the best facility, everything she needs. Jasmine's vision swam. This couldn't be real. Men didn't buy buildings to trap baristas. They didn't offer miracles with strings attached. They didn't look at you like you were simultaneously the answer to their prayers and the cause of their damnation. And if I refuse? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then you walk out of here right now. Your old contract remains valid. I'll never contact you again. Your sister continues waiting for a miracle that won't come. He paused. The choice is yours, Miss Torres. It has always been yours. I'm simply offering an option you didn't have yesterday. The jazz music had stopped. The silence stretched between them like a chasm one she could cross or refuse to cross. But either way, nothing would be the same. Jasmine thought of Nina's last text. The words burned into her memory. I'm not scared. 8. I know you're doing everything you can. Everything she could. Every sacrifice. Every humiliation. Every exhausted morning and sleepless night. But it hadn't been enough. It would never be enough unless she crossed this bridge. What kind of contract? Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Rashid's eyes gleamed with something that might have been triumph, or might have been sorrow. Come upstairs. Let me show you exactly what I'm offering. And then you decide if the cage I'm building is one you can live in. He extended his hand across the counter. Jasmine stared at his elegant fingers. A platinum watch that probably cost more than Nina's entire treatment. Skin that had never known real work. This was the moment, the point of no return. She could walk away, keep her pride, watch her sister fade. Or she could take his hand and step into the unknown. Nina's face floated before her eyes. That brave smile, that unshakable faith. Jasmine reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, firm, inevitable. It's like a contract signed in flesh instead of ink. Show me, she whispered. And Rashid al-Zahir smiled like a man who had just won a war he'd been fighting alone for far too long. The elevator rose in silence, each floor a heartbeat in Jasmine's chest. Rashid stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough that they didn't touch. The space between them felt charged with electricity, with unspoken words and dangerous possibilities. She studied his reflection in the polished steel doors, the sharp jawline, the aristocratic nose, the mouth that seemed carved for cruelty but held something softer at its edges. He caught her watching, and their eyes met in the reflection. Neither looked away. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor. When the doors opened, Jasmine stepped into a world she'd only seen in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering a view of Singapore that made the city look like a jewel box spilled across black velvet. The furniture was minimal, but exquisite Italian leather, dark wood, artwork that whispered money in every brushstroke. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly clean, perfectly empty. This was a showroom, not a home. Nobody lived here. Nobody loved here? A woman waited by the windows, her posture military straight, despite the elegant hijab and tailored suit. She turned as they entered, her expression professionally neutral. Rashid gestured toward her with a slight nod. "This is Farah, my executive assistant and legal advisor. She'll witness our discussion and ensure everything is properly documented." His voice had shifted into business mode, crisp and efficient. "Farah, please bring the contracts." Farah moved to a glossy table and retrieved a leather portfolio. She laid it open with practiced precision, revealing pages of dense legal text. Jasmine's stomach churned. This was real. Terrifyingly, impossibly real. "Sit," Rashid said, gesturing to the sofa. It wasn't a request. Jasmine sat, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Rashid took the chair across from her, leaning back with deceptive casualness. Only his eyes betrayed intensity. They tracked her every movement. Every breath, like a scientist observing a crucial experiment. "Let me be clear about what I'm offering," he began. $200,000, transferred immediately to the hospital of your choice for your sister's treatment. An additional monthly allowance of $10,000 for living expenses. Full medical coverage for both you and Nina. A trust fund that will ensure her education through university, regardless of what happens between us. Jasmine's breath caught. It was more than she'd dreamed. More than she'd thought possible. In exchange for what? Your time. Your presence. Your companionship. He said the last word carefully, watching her reaction. "For 1 year, you'll live here. You'll accompany me to social functions, business dinners, family gatherings. You'll present yourself as someone I'm seriously involved with. You'll be available when I need you." The words "available" hung in the air like a threat. Jasmine's spine straightened. "I'm not a prostitute. I'm not asking you to be one." His voice was sharp, almost offended. "There are rules, Miss Torres. Very specific rules." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze boring into hers. "Rule 1. You live here, in the guest suite. Your own space, your own privacy. I will never enter without your explicit permission. Rule 2. Physical contact is limited. We may hold hands in public. I may place my hand on your back or shoulder for appearances. Nothing more. Nothing intimate." Jasmine frowned. "Then why Rule 3?" he continued, cutting her off. "I will never, under any circumstances, touch you in a romantic or sexual manner unless you ask me to. And you won't ask. You won't beg. You won't break that rule. Because if you do," his eyes darkened, something dangerous flickering in their depths. "If you do, the nature of our arrangement changes completely, and I'm not certain either of us is ready for that." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jasmine's pulse hammered in her throat. "What if I want to leave before the year is up?" "You can, at any time," his answer surprised her. "But if you leave within the first 6 months, the financial support stops immediately. After 6 months, you'll receive a severance payment of $50,000, and Nina's trust fund remains intact. After the full year, you receive $200,000 as a completion bonus, plus the trust fund." "Why?" The question burst from her lips. "Why me? Why any of this? You could have any woman you want. Women who would do this for free, who would kill for this opportunity. Why a barista from Manila who can barely pay her rent?" For the first time, Rashid's composure cracked. He stood abruptly, walking to the windows, his back to her. His shoulders were tight with tension. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, raw with something that sounded like pain. "God, you're real. Because every woman I've met in the past 10 years has wanted something from me. My money, my title, my connections. They perform, they pretend, they mold themselves into whatever they think I want." He turned, and the look in his eyes made her chest ache. "But you didn't even see me. I watched you for weeks, and you never once noticed. You were too busy fighting for something that actually mattered. You have fire in you, Miss Torres. Real fire. Not the manufactured passion of people playing games. You want to own that fire?" "No." His smile was sad, almost self-mocking. "I want to warm myself by it. For just a little while. Before the cold takes me completely." The honesty in his words disarmed her. This wasn't a predator's speech. This was a man who was profoundly, desperately lonely. Jasmine recognized it because she'd seen that loneliness in her own mirror for years, the isolation that comes from carrying burdens no one else can see. Farah cleared her throat delicately. If you need time to consider, Nina doesn't have time. Jasmine's voice was steady now. She stood, walked to the table, picked up the pen. I have questions first. Rashid moved closer. Not quite invading her space, but near enough that she could smell his collar, something with cedar and spice that made her think of distant desserts and ancient stories. Ask, can I still work? See, my friends? You can work if you wish, though it won't be necessary financially. Your friends can visit with advance notice for security purposes. You'll have freedom, Miss Torres. This isn't a prison. Can I talk to Nina? Video call her? Every day if you want. I'll arrange for a secure line. You can visit her on weekends. Jasmine looked down at the contract, the words blurring together. This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. But Nina's face swam before her eyes, not the sick, pale version in the hospital bed, but the vibrant girl who used to dance in the rain and make up songs about nothing. The girl who deserved a chance to grow up, to fall in love, to live a life that wasn't measured in treatments and complications. One more question. Jasmine looked up, meeting Rashid's eyes. Why the rule? Why promise never to touch me unless I ask? His expression shuddered, walls slamming down behind his eyes. Because I want you to choose me. Not my money. Not what I can give you. Me. If that day ever comes, if you ever look at me and want me for who I am, not what I can provide, then I want it to be real. I've had enough beautiful lies to last several lifetimes. The vulnerability in his words cracked something open in Jasmine's chest. She understood suddenly that she wasn't the only prisoner in this golden cage. Rashid had been trapped far longer in a prison built from expectations and obligations and the crushing weight of never being seen as simply human. Okay, she whispered, I'll sign. Something flashed across his face, relief, triumph, fear, all tangled together. He stepped back, giving her space. Jasmine read through the contract with Farah's quiet guidance, her hand steady as she initialed each page. When she reached the signature line, she paused, the pen hovering over the paper. This was the moment. The last moment she could turn back. She thought of Nina. She thought of her mother's exhausted face. She thought of a 10-year-old girl who believed her big sister could do anything. Jasmine signed her name in blue ink. The scratch of the pen sounded like a door closing, or maybe opening. She couldn't tell which. Farah witnessed the signature, then handed the portfolio to Rashid. He signed without hesitation, his handwriting bold and decisive. When he looked up, something had changed in his eyes. Satisfaction. Yes, but also a wariness, as if he'd just acquired something precious and dangerous that might shatter if held too tightly. I'll have the funds transferred within the hour, he said, his voice formal again. Farah will show you to your suite. Your belongings will be collected tomorrow and moved here. You start immediately. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. Jasmine didn't know what else to say. How do you thank someone for buying your life? For offering salvation with chains attached? Rashid's expression softened fractionally. Don't thank me yet, Miss Torres. You don't know what you've just agreed to. Neither do you, she replied quietly for a moment. Something sparked between them, acknowledgement, challenge. The first stirring of a connection that was far more dangerous than any contract clause. Then Farah was at her elbow, guiding her toward a hallway, and Rashid was turning back to the windows. His silhouette dark against the glittering city, Jasmine's new room was larger than her entire apartment. Cream walls, silk bedding, a bathroom with marble and gold fixtures. A prison, yes, but a beautiful one. She stood at her own window, looking out at Singapore spreading below like a promise or a threat, and called her mother. Mama, she said when the phone clicked. Nina's going to be okay. I found a way. Her mother's sob of relief made tears spring to Jasmine's eyes. She didn't mention the contract. Didn't mention the prince who'd purchased paradise to capture a coffee girl. Some prices were meant to be paid in silence. She hung up and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Somewhere in this penthouse, Rashid Al-Zahir was probably doing the same thing, two souls in a golden cage, wondering if they'd just saved each other or destroyed everything they'd ever been. Outside, the city lights blurred into stars, and the contract lay signed, sealed, and utterly irrevocable. 3 months passed like a fever dream. Jasmine learned to navigate her new world with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield. The penthouse became familiar, the way morning light hit the marble at precisely 6:15. The soft hum of the espresso machine that Rashid had installed when he noticed her longing looks toward the golden bean. The particular silence that fell at night when they were both awake, but pretending not to be aware of each other's presence through the walls. The public performances were easier than expected. Rashid was a consummate actor, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back as they entered galas, where women dripped diamonds and judgment in equal measure. He introduced her simply as Jasmine, never elaborating, letting people draw their own conclusions. Some assumed she was an actress or model, others whispered gold digger behind gloved hands. Jasmine learned to smile through both, her chin high, her hand resting lightly in the crook of Rashid's arm. But the private moments were harder. Those quiet evenings, when he worked late in his study and she read on the sofa, both pretending the other wasn't there. The mornings when they'd meet in the kitchen, still rumpled from sleep, Rashid would wordlessly prepare her coffee exactly how she liked it: 2 sugars, a splash of cream, no words necessary. The way he'd leave fresh flowers in her suite every Monday, always jasmine blooms, never mentioning them. The small intimacies that had nothing to do with the contract and everything to do with two people learning each other's rhythms. Despite themselves, Nina's surgery had been a success. Jasmine video called her sister every evening at 7. Watching color return to those cheeks, hearing laughter replace the labored breathing. Her mother sent photos Nina at physical therapy, Nina smiling, Nina alive. Each image was a reminder of why Jasmine had signed her name in blue ink. Each image made the cage feel both more bearable and more suffocating. Then came the night everything shifted. Jasmine was alone in the penthouse. Rashid had traveled to Dubai for business when Farah arrived unannounced, her normally composed face tight with concern. "There's something you should know," Farah said, setting a folder on the glass coffee table, "about Prince Rashid, about why he made this arrangement." Jasmine's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, legal documents. She read, and the world rearranged itself into a different shape. 8 years ago, Rashid had been engaged. Her name was Amira, the daughter of a prominent Saudi family. The photographs showed them together, Rashid younger, his eyes alive with something that looked like joy. Amira had been beautiful, delicate, with a smile that could light up shadows. They'd been in love, genuinely, deeply in love. The kind of love that poets wrote about and cynics claimed didn't exist. But love wasn't enough. Political pressures, family obligations, the weight of tradition, all of it had crushed their relationship like a flower under an iron boot. Amira had been forced to marry someone else, a strategic alliance that benefited two powerful families. 3 months after her wedding, she died in a car accident that the investigation had ruled suspicious, but couldn't prove was anything other than tragic fate. Rashid had blamed himself for not fighting harder, for not protecting her, for letting duty destroy the only real thing he'd ever known. He'd built walls around his heart so high and so thick that nothing could penetrate them. He'd devoted himself to business, to power, to control, because if he controlled everything, nothing could hurt him again. "He sees Amira in you," Farah said quietly. "Not physically, but the fire, the refusal to compromise who you are for anyone. That's why he chose you. He's trying to recapture something he lost. Or maybe punish himself by keeping it at arm's length." Jasmine closed the folder, her chest tight. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're changing him." Farah's eyes were kind, but sad. "He laughs now. Small things, but I notice. He comes home earlier. He asks about you when he's traveling. The walls are cracking, Miss Torres. And when they fall completely, you both need to be ready for what comes next." 3 days later, Rashid returned from Dubai. Jasmine was waiting in the living room when he entered. Her decision already made. He looked exhausted, his shirt wrinkled, shadows under his eyes. But when he saw her, his face softened into something approaching relief. "You're still here," he said. "We need to talk." His expression shuddered immediately. He set down his briefcase with careful precision. "If this is about leaving, it's about Amira." Rashid froze. The color drained from his face. "Farah told you?" "Yes." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he moved to the bar, poured himself whiskey with shaking hands, and drank it in one swallow. When he turned back, his eyes were raw with old pain. "So now you know. The pathetic widower who's trying to replace a ghost?" "No." Jasmine stood, crossing the space between them. "That's not what I see. I see a man who loved so completely that he's terrified to ever risk feeling that way again. I see someone who built a cage to protect himself and ended up trapped inside it. And you." His voice was harsh, defensive. "What are you, Jasmine? My paid companion? My therapist? My second chance at redemption? I'm a woman who's been living in her own cage long before I met you." She stopped a foot away from him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I've been so busy surviving, so focused on saving everyone else, that I forgot what it feels like to actually live. To want something just for myself, to be more than the sum of my obligations. What do you want?" The question was barely a whisper. Jasmine took a breath. This was it. The moment that would either free them both or shatter whatever fragile thing they'd built. "I want to stay. Not because of the contract. Not because of the money. I want to stay because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be seen. Really seen? You look at me like I matter, not just as Nina's sister or my mother's daughter, but as me. Jasmine. Just Jasmine." Rashid's jaw clenched. "The contract, forget the contract." She reached up, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. He flinched but didn't pull away. "I'm asking, Rashid. I'm breaking the rule. Touch me. Not because you paid for it. Not because it's expected. Touch me because you want to. Because I matter to you the way you've come to matter to me. You don't know what you're asking." His voice broke. "If I touch you, if I let myself feel again, and then I lose you, you won't lose me. Not unless you push me away trying to protect yourself from ghosts." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. "We're both so tired of being afraid. So tired of cages, even golden ones. What if we were just brave? For once, what if we chose each other, knowing it might hurt, knowing it might be complicated, but choosing anyway?" Something crumbled in Rashid's expression. The walls he'd spent 8 years building came down in a cascade of need and fear and desperate hope. His hand came up, covering hers where it rested against his face. His eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt, any hint of performance. He found only honesty. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too. I'll probably be terrible at this. I'll want to control everything. I'll try to protect you in ways that feel suffocating. I'll call you out on it. I'll fight you. I'll make you crazy." The smallest smile tugged at his lips. "You already do." Then he was pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might disappear if he didn't hold tight enough. Jasmine pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart hammering against her cheek. They stood there for long minutes, just breathing, just being. Two people stepping out of separate prisons and finding freedom in each other's arms. When Rashid finally pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes were wet. "I don't know how to do this without the rules. Without the contract between us. Then we figure it out together. We make new rules. Honest ones. Built on choice, not obligation." Jasmine smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "Starting with this, I choose you, Rashid Al-Zahir. Not your money. Not what you can give my family. You. The man who notices when I need coffee, who leaves flowers without taking credit, who's been just as trapped as I have. I choose you too, Jasmine Torres." His voice was reverent, like a vow. My fire, my second chance. My proof that maybe, just maybe, broken things can heal. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the careful, controlled man she'd met 3 months ago. It was raw and desperate, and real, a man remembering how to feel. A woman learning that she was allowed to want something just for herself. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jasmine laughed. "What?" Rashid asked, a genuine smile transforming his face into something young and unguarded. "I just realized you bought an entire building complex just to meet me. That's either the most romantic or the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." He laughed too, the sound rusty but beautiful. "Both. Definitely both." They spent that night talking until dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Rashid told her about Amira, about the guilt he'd carried, about how he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve happiness again. Jasmine told him about the years of struggling, about the weight of being the strong one, about how she'd forgotten that needing help didn't make her weak. They dismantled their walls brick by brick, replacing them with honesty and trust and the fragile beginning of something real. 6 months later, Jasmine stood in a hospital garden, watching Nina chase butterflies. Her sister's laughter rang clear and bright, the sound of health restored and life reclaimed. Rashid sat beside her on the bench, his hand in hers, not for show, not for the cameras that sometimes still followed them, but simply because that's where it belonged. "The contract ends next month," he said quietly. "I know what happens then." Jasmine turned to look at him, this man who'd been a stranger, then a captor, then a companion, and finally her choice. "Then we write a new one. Not on paper. Not with lawyers present. Just you and me, promising to keep choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That sounds like marriage, maybe. Someday." She squeezed his hand. "But first, I think we should try just being together without any contracts at all. No time limits, no obligations. Just two people who found each other in the strangest way possible and decided that maybe strange isn't so bad." Rashid pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I like strange, me too." They sat there as the sun climbed higher, watching Nina play, watching the world turn. No longer prisoners of circumstance or fear, but architects of their own futures. The golden cage had been dismantled, its bars melted down and reformed into something new. Not a prison, but a foundation. A beginning, and sometimes, just sometimes. The best love stories start with the most ridiculous purchases and the bravest leaps of faith.